A lot of people think life begins when you're born or conceived or whatever other answers they're coming up with these days. For some people, though, life actually begins the day a doctor tells them that if they don't make some serious changes in their lives, they're going to die. You see, my life began the morning of my 41st birthday in January of 2019. I stood staring in the mirror, looking back on my life after stepping on the scale and finding out I was over 400 pounds for the second time in my life. You know, my dad died when I was 17. So my choice was plain to see in front of me. Either I take charge of my health, make the necessary changes to live, or do nothing and die knowing that my daughter, being only 6 years old, would spend the majority of her life calling some other man daddy. Can't you see? There's no one coming to save me in this moment. It was me who had to become the hero in my story. You know, we live in a world that has a system in place to remove all accountability from every decision we ever make. Taking accountability and fixing the problem is painful. It's like a journey through the pit of hell while feeling the pain of every lost soul that resides there. But in the end, the journey becomes the foundation of your testimony. My fight has become my calling. So if you're out there struggling and you hear the sound of my voice, I'm telling you that your story is not over. As long as you have breath in your lungs, there is still time. But it's your fight, your story, your moment to stand up and do what heroes do. It's a long road ahead, and it sucks. And maybe you're thinking you can't do it. But I'm here to tell you that you have all the tools you need. You always have, and you always will, because you are enough. And most of all, you are worth it. Nobody is more capable than you. Yeah, Friday! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be listening. Thanks for making me part of your day. This is episode 242 of the Ranting Weight Watcher podcast. And before I get started today, I want to talk to you guys about workshops. If you're looking for a workshop, you're looking for a bunch of people to create some sort of support system for you to excel in the weight loss program of your choice, look, Coach Sophie F. has a great workshop on Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're looking for a great group of people that are all focused and working hard to do what they do, 9 a.m. Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Coach Sophie F.'s workshop. Go and be there. You'll see me there every Saturday morning, and you'll see the people there. I didn't know them when I started, and man, I can't imagine a week going by and not seeing them. That's what this does to you. You grow with people. You want to see them succeed. You want to know that they're doing well every week. That's the kind of support system that this creates. If you are looking for a support system and you're a Weight Watchers member, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Coach Sophie F. I'll see you there. Now, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this! Journey updates. So I am down this week, down 0.8 pounds. That is total lost, 181.4 pounds since January 12, 2019. My current weight at this point is 214.2 pounds. pounds remaining to get to the 200-pound weight loss goal that I set 6 years ago, 18.6 pounds. My work stats for the week go from July 13th to July 19th. The total steps taken in that time is 97,498 steps. That's an average steps per day of 13,928 steps per day. Total miles walked is 44.8 miles. That's an average miles per day of 6.4 miles per day. It was a great week overall. And for the first time ever, in 6.5 years, I can say 4 losses in a row. Imagine I've been doing this 6.5 years, and that's the first time I could say that. It was rare to be able to say 3, and now I can say it has been 4 in a row. All I can say is we keep it going, let it ride. Let it ride. We're going to, we got our chips on the table and the roulette wheel is just spinning. We're going to keep on going with it, right? And look, as long as I check the boxes every week, there's no reason to believe anything to go wrong at this point. So this week, I'm trying to continue off of, because really the story for last week's episode. So if you haven't seen last week's episode 241, you want to stop here and go to that episode and then come back here afterwards. But I'm going to recap really quickly. So episode 241, we talked about the kings and queens in our life. And we talked about how we start our life, and kind of like mom and dad are the king and queen of our kingdom. And as we go through life, we talk about teachers, principals, all kinds of things becoming the kings and queens in our life. And even into adulthood, your boss, everything, all of these things become people who rule over your life. Various reasons that they rule over your life, I get all of that. I'm not even coming against it or anything like that. But I did bring up a dynamic here that brought up when you are attempting to do something like this, a weight loss lifestyle that has the chance of making people uncomfortable, right? The world seems to be filled with people that they are perfectly okay with what you're doing, so long as you don't make them feel bad about themselves in the process. The thing about that is, eventually, it's inevitable. If you keep doing something to better yourself, eventually you're going to be pointing out to the world what they aren't doing to better themselves. And they can't live under delusions that it can't be done if they see somebody they know, especially someone they thought they were superior to, accomplishing what they say they can't do. When people become uncomfortable, they change, right? Yeah, they change. And the thing is, their answer is not to change themselves to make themselves feel better based on how you're making them feel uncomfortable. And let me be straight here. You don't even have to be saying anything to make them uncomfortable. You just have to be living in a certain way that shows them what they're not doing for themselves. You can convict their spirit simply by doing better for yourself. Now, in the process, when they see you doing these things, like I said, they are perfectly okay with it. While they can still tell themselves that they feel they are superior to you, they will be supportive. And the minute you start to make them feel uncomfortable, they're going to start having an opinion about what you're doing. Because the natural thing is not to, if it's me, right? If the natural thing wouldn't be to correct myself, to, fix how I feel, the natural thing would be to stop you from doing it, to correct you. Fix your problem that's making me feel uncomfortable, right? And the thing is, if we're not careful, we end up hindering ourselves, hindering our journeys based on what people say to us. We end up sabotaging ourselves based on someone else thinking it's too extreme what we're doing. They'll use words to gaslight what you're doing, make you feel a certain way about what you're doing, because they know they couldn't do it themselves. And really, I've said it once, I said it 1,000 times, what people say to you says more about them than it does about you. I used a story last week about a king. And this king forced people to worship a golden statue that he created of himself. And he found favor with 4 men. That was Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He found favor with them. And part of that was because of Daniel's gift to have a vision for what is coming, right? Prophetic visions. So he builds this statue. This is kind of where we left off last week. He builds this statue and he demands with some kind of instrument playing, whether it's a trumpet, whether it's a flute, or whatever it is. He ordered the people of the land that if they heard some sort of instrument playing, that they all had to stop whatever they were doing and bow down to the worship the statue, worship the image. So when he did it one day, he noticed 3 men that didn't bow. And right away, he saw that they were Daniel's friends. And now he felt kind of weird about this because he favored them. He thought, clearly something's wrong here. I'm going to give them a second chance. So he calls them in and he says to them, or he says to Daniel, I'll give them a second chance, but they can't be doing this and this and that. And Daniel said, essentially, there's no need to give them a second chance. They won't do it. They trust so much in their God that even if their God didn't show up, they still wouldn't worship your statue in that situation, even if he didn't show up to save them. So this angered the king, and he ordered that the furnace be made 7 times hotter than it normally is. It was so hot that the guards bringing the 3 men to the furnace to throw them in there died on the way in. On the way as they got close to it. In the process, long story short, from last week, the 3 men survived. God was protecting them in the fire. Their faith in God was so great that he showed up to save them in that moment. So here we go forward some time here. That king basically went insane. He was like a shadow of his former self, and he was locked in a dungeon because he was insane. And his son took over. And his son was your typical king's son where, he got all of the worship and all of the glamour of royalty, but never earned it, never did anything to be humble or whatsoever. So he was even more prideful and than his father was. Now, he had lavish parties and all kinds of things, and he essentially blasphemed God in the process. And a message appears on the wall. And so he knows the gift that Daniel has. He's very concerned about this message on the wall. I don't remember exactly the message, but there was a prophetic message here that essentially told this king he would no longer be ruling, that this kingdom would be given to another that is on the way. However much time goes by, and basically a king by the name of Cyrus shows up and takes the land. The people are so afraid of this king that they didn't even fight. They didn't even fight back. They just let him in. Okay? And the king also got to know Daniel in the process. And he favored Daniel. Daniel was a really good friend to him. There came a point where, because of him helping him out with prophetic visions and stuff like that, that he basically gave the promise to Daniel and his 3 friends that they can worship their God. And there would be no problems whatsoever on his end. They can worship whatever God it is that they believe in, and from there, it wouldn't matter. So they were going about their business. And now here's where things change for Daniel. You see, his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they already went through the fire. They already got their challenge. So essentially now it's Daniel's turn to go through the fire, to have his faith tested. One of the people that works in the kingdom sees the favor that Daniel has, and he does not like it one bit. Daniel essentially gets everything he wants, and he's not even one of them. Whatever is the country or whatever it is that Cyrus comes from, this man works under King Cyrus, and he gets treated worse than Daniel, essentially. And this man doesn't like that. So he starts to whisper in the king's ears. Surely you should test them. They haven't shown their loyalty to you. You don't really know what they're thinking about you. This is gaslighting the king. Even though he already made promises that they could worship the God of their choice, now he's got this voice in his head that's making him question their loyalty. Even though Daniel had helped him with prophetic visions and everything else. So he makes a decree, which is part of some law that was already written, that basically when this law is declared, they can't worship any god for 30 days. And so Daniel is a man of prayer, and he literally is praying 3 times a day, and now he's being told he can't pray at all. So he's kind of freaking out about this. He essentially says anybody who disobeys this will get thrown in a den of lions. Daniel never broke his pattern, never broke his routine of praying 3 times a day and seeking God's face 3 times a day. And this man that worked for the king, who pointed all this out, catches Daniel in the process. And he goes to the king and he says, see, he's doing it right now. He's disobeying you right to your face. This man does not respect you. So he orders the guards to seize Daniel and throw him in the lion's den. And this is the point where Daniel has his turn to have faith in the God of his choice. To have faith that everything he's always believed his whole life, that his God would protect him in this moment. He's thrown in this den of lions, and the den of lions, basically none of them touch him. God protects him all night, and they stay at peace with him. The king this night he can't sleep. He's going crazy because in his mind he really had come to like Daniel. And so he's like panicking the next morning, hoping to God that the God that Daniel believes in saved Daniel. And he's running to the lion's den. He orders the guards, open the den. And he's calling for Daniel. Daniel, if the God you believe in is real, please come out of there. And he sees that Daniel comes out unscathed. And he's like thanking God and praising the God of Daniel, that he protected Daniel in this evening. And essentially apologizes to him and hopes that he can be forgiven. And then he orders the guards to seize the man that put the ideas in his head in the first place, and anybody who works with them and their families, and throw all of them into the den of lions. Every single one of those people that was thrown in there was torn apart. There was only bones left. The point of the story today is Daniel had to go through the fire. And his friends had to go through the fire. The two of them were in the same system. Follow me for a second here. They both, the three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, all believed in the same God. All believed in the same rules. All believed in the same theories. So the program was the same. But the fire was different. The trial, the challenge, everything that made them who they are was completely different from one another. Three of them were grouped together and actually had to sit in fire and not be burned. And the other had to sit with lions and not be eaten. Both of them went through the fire using the same God or the same program, but both of them had something they had to do which was different from one another, but took the same kind of work. Faith. Trust. Trust in the system. Trust in the belief that they grew up their entire lives with. Completely different scenarios, but the same system. How many times have you heard me tell you that this journey is like going through the fire? How many times have you heard me refer to it as you have to go through the fire in order to become the best version of you? Because the best version of you is the version of you that, whatever scale number comes at the end of this, is the version of you that's going to be able to keep it And it's not going to be a struggle anymore, because the best version of you no longer has a God that rules over, or a king that rules their life. That is food. They are the ruler of their own domain. They have complete control of their urges. All of the things that moved them before, none of them move them anymore. But they had to go through the fire to become that individual. Are we not all in the same system? Have we not all had to, how many times have you heard somebody tell you, trust the process? And how many times have you actually trusted it? How much faith and trust have you put into the process of going through the fire, knowing what has to come, how hard it's going to be, how painful it's going to be, how tough it's going to be? How many times have you trusted it? I know you've heard the term, trust the process. I know you've heard that, God, probably hundreds of times in your time being in this system. But how many times have you actually trusted it? How many times have you put all the chips in the center of the table and stood there waiting? Even though circumstances might dictate otherwise, you stood on what you believed you were doing being right, regardless of what anybody else's opinion was. Regardless of what this one said is the right thing to do, or that one said is the right thing to do. Regardless of what the system volunteers. How many times have you actually trusted the system that much? Despite, we've been told how many times how this all works. The fundamentals, tracking your food, weighing and measuring your food, getting out and work, moving, making better choices. We've been given every tool necessary. Yet, we still have to go through the fire to become the greatest version of ourselves. Still. There's no getting away from that. Sometimes, when you hear people, like when people describe God or whatever, you can hear many people say, oh, he's this man sitting on a throne in heaven. But I have a quite different vision of God. And maybe you'll think I'm crazy. That's okay. I'm willing to risk that. I've been called crazy many times in my life, and it's okay. But my vision of God is a blacksmith. We're going through the fire, right? What if, let's say it this way. If you were actually a blacksmith and you wanted to shape a piece of metal, what do you have to do? You have to get it hot, right? You have to put it in the fire. You have to make that fire so hot that you actually start to make the metal pliable. And then you take it out, you start to hammer it so you can shape it a certain way, and then you put it back in the fire. You let it get even hotter, and then you hammer it some more. This is my vision of God. He allows us to go into the fire. And as we turn to him and depend on him, He pulls the metal out. He starts hammering it. And each and every one of us is being turned into one of two things. We're either being turned into a tool to build the kingdom, or we're being turned into a weapon to tear down the other kingdom. So a tool to build or a weapon to tear down. I have said a few times in the history of this podcast that I believe I am like a wrecking ball. I come in to destroy the way you think. I come in and I swing that big iron ball on the end of the chain and I demolish the building that is everything you ever thought to be true since the beginning of your life. Sometimes I do that in one episode. Sometimes I do that in many episodes. Whatever it takes, eventually I destroy the vision you have of how this should go. And I point in the direction of the fundamentals that build the big foundation, the strong foundation that is what is going to be the journey or the building that you create. So I demolish what's there and I help you to build a foundation of fundamentals. So I'm going through the fire just like you. I'm in a different part of it than you are. I'm a different kind of thing than you are. Whatever it is. But that's my vision of God. My vision is that he's a blacksmith and he's shaping and sharpening and hammering and smoothing out every single one of us to be a tool of construction or a weapon of destruction. And the only way you find out what you are is by going through the fire. You have to go through the fire to get to where you're supposed to be, to get to become the greatest version of you. Tell me something. If you have the simplest barriers of food in your life, if these are major barriers for you, does the enemy have to show up at all? How can you fight God's fight if all he has to do to stop you is put something in your path that you can't resist? I mean, this is not just food. This is literally anything. Food, drugs, alcohol, the list is endless. If you can be stopped by simply putting something like that in your path, or simply putting someone in your path that enjoys those things too, if that's all he has to do, does he ever have to show up to stop you in anything? And so long as you keep these barriers, so long as you keep these limitations, these obstacles, these addictions, so long as you keep those things, does he ever have to show up? Do you ever become the greatest version of you if we can't defeat the simplest of battles? When we think about Jesus and what he went through before he got nailed to a cross, if we think about that, and we are essentially in somewhere in the Bible, I don't remember what verse it is, and I can't even quote it exactly, but basically we would be the same would happen to us because we believe in him. Right? We believe Jesus died on a cross for our sins. And whatever happened to him, the same will happen to us because we believe it. The ridicule, all this other stuff, that will happen to us because we believe it. And if we can't win the simplest fights, how do we ever get to that fight? How do we ever get to that fight and say we'll win it with faith if we can't even use the systems in place to defeat the little battles, the tiny battles in the overall scheme of things? These things that we struggle with, they're small, they're tiny. And when you think about the ridicule that comes for simply believing, simply saying, I am a Christian who believes that Jesus Christ died for my sins, to be that person, to know that at some point in the future, Christianity is the most attacked religion. People want to pretend it's everything else. They're attacking it, and you're not even paying attention. It's an outright attack. Everything, every single holiday. Tell me something, whether it's a Muslim holiday, whether it's a Jewish holiday, whether it's, you pick the religion. What is the Santa Claus of the Jewish religions? What is the Easter Bunny of the Jewish religions? Of the Muslim religions? What is it? We have all of these things that have changed and distorted what is supposed to be a holy time. Our vision of Christmas has been so distorted, it has completely lost its true nature. And anybody who has they still talk about Jesus like he's still a baby. But where are they? Where is the commercialized version of all the other religions? That alone is proof of Christianity being the most attacked one. And then you got Easter. There is not a single word written in the Bible of Easter. That word Easter is not written in the Bible anywhere. And somehow that's what we call it. Maybe you should start reading about that word to understand how distorted everything has really become and how corrupt everything really is. It's only through the actual vision of the truth that we actually make change. When I stood there on my birthday, my 41st birthday, January 4th, 2019, and saw that I was 403 pounds, that was the day I could no longer deny my situation. And that's what I'm essentially saying. When you finally see the truth of any situation in your life, that's when you can no longer ignore it. But as long as you don't see the truth, it doesn't exist. Even what I'm saying about the Christmas holiday, the Easter holiday, even what I'm saying there, it doesn't exist unless you see it yourself. We need to really grasp what truth is. Because things are changing rapidly in this world. And we aren't even ready to fight the smallest of battles. We are certainly not ready to fight the large ones that are on the way. We need to wake up in many ways. In many, many ways. And realize just how much the chips are stacked against us. This doesn't mean you become a victim and say, oh, well, the chips are stacked against me. I can't. No, you do in spite of. That's what it means. No matter how many things are stacked against you, you do in spite of. Because if you choose to be a victim, you're going to wake up every day and continue to be a victim until you stop choosing. We need to get to a point where we start to make the really hard decisions that end the hold that the people in our lives have over us, the hold that food has over us, drugs, alcohol, pornography, all these things that have a hold on our lives. We need to master all of them in order to become the greatest version of ourselves. There is good news, though. And the good news is, it doesn't matter how many years you got this wrong. It doesn't matter how many times you failed. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It literally, everything wrong that happened before this moment of you hearing me speak, it no longer matters. There's only one thing that matters, and that is what you do going forward. You have some truth that I gave you today. And that truth is the fundamentals are where it begins. And the fundamentals don't go away just because you think you know what you're doing. They stay as a detrimental part of your journey every minute of every day, in spite of how many years you've been doing it. Because the minute we stop practicing these things is the minute we slowly lose control of everything we have created. And if you ever want to be the master of your own domain, the king of your own kingdom, the idea that you can live as lazy as you want to and accomplish what you're trying to accomplish is a foolish idea. It's a delusion, and it needs to be forgotten. And the even greater delusion of the fact that you will never have to make sacrifices, that everything, you don't have to live with the idea that you might have to let go of something. And everything that is available to you in this world is available to you. You have to let go of that nonsensical, delusional bullshit. Because that's just what it is. That's the kind of barrier we allow to stay there. We clearly know it's there, but we can't imagine life without it. And just thinking about life without this stuff makes us so scared and so overwhelmed and so intimidated that you run from the situation. You would rather live a life of sickness, disease, and keep your crutches. Keep the barriers. Keep the obstacles. So long as you don't feel uncomfortable. That's how deep the delusion goes. We're willing to believe anything because we want it to be true. We hear slogans like, nothing is off the table. And in reality, that thing that should be off the table is just as dangerous to you as crack, cocaine, anything. Alcohol, all of it. And in matter of fact, I would say it's more dangerous than those things because the world knows those things are dangerous. But nobody's going past the Doritos in the junk food aisle or the other chips and everything else. They're not looking at that stuff and thinking that is dangerous and that is poisonous. Instead, you freely eat those every day of your life because God forbid you live without them. God forbid you get a little uncomfortable. God forbid you experience what it might feel like to sit in a fiery furnace, to sit in a den of lions. God forbid you discover that. And God forbid you come out on the other side of that and discover that not only were you strong enough to go through it, you're even better on the back end of it. And you're wondering, why on earth didn't I do this sooner? I love each and every one of you. God bless you all.